it's Mark Renison with a pickleball lesson going on in the background. Welcome to another episode of Pickleball Today. We got a great show lined up for you. Sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Being able to put the serve exactly where you want is a really useful skill, whether you want to make your opponents move or force them to play a weakness or just keeping things interesting. And the thing that directly controls where the ball ends up when you're serving is the angle of the paddle at the moment of contact. But where you stand can actually play an influence as well, and it's really important to understand how this works. So why don't we go on the court and take a look, and I'll show you how you can get an easy advantage with your serve. Okay, so here's me out on the court, and watch this serve. Notice where I'm standing. I'm right near the tee, right near the center, and I hit this serve pretty well. Look at that. Lands right near that sideline, almost on the line. And pay attention to where it rebounds after this. We're gonna look at this a few times, so don't worry if you're not exactly sure. Okay, so really wide serve, and it sort of keeps rebounding. Not bad. Now, what if I stand over here way at the sideline, by the singles line? Okay, look at that. Doesn't even land as wide as the previous one. It's still pretty good. It's close to the sideline, but not as good as you can see here. But check out the rebound here. Watch the rebound. There you go. Now it's going to be easier if we can see these sort of laid on top of each other, and you'll see that the second serve, when I stood out wide, even though the serve didn't land as close to the sideline, it actually rebounded even wider, and that's going to be really important when I'm serving out wide trying to make my opponent move. So this is a really nice illustration that where you stand makes a difference. If you're standing out wide, that ball is going to rebound wider, all things being equal. Let's look at it from the left side of the court. You're going to use this a lot when you're serving to a right-handed player's backhand. Okay, so check out the first one and check out the second one. Even though they land in virtually the same spot, when I'm standing out wide, it's going to rebound wider. It's going to have a much better effect getting out to the backhand or pulling my opponent off the court. Because it's not just about where the ball lands, it's about where the ball was coming from. Because where the ball is coming from before it lands is going to sort of influence where it keeps going. It's going to keep going on that kind of a trajectory. Okay, now let's look at one more time here. This time I'm serving to the tee. Imagine I'm trying to get to that right-handed player's backhand again. So I'm standing at the tee, I serve. Oh, what a serve, Mark. That's a good one. Lands it right on the line. And you can see how that's for sure going to stay to their backhand. Now when I stand out wide, again landing the ball on the line, but look at the rebound. It sort of brings it back into the court. And if we overlap the two, you can see here that standing at the tee gives me a way better advantage on this tee serve. Again, not because the ball landed anywhere differently, but because the ball continues on the path from which it was sent. Okay, so there you go. Where you stand isn't going to determine where the ball ends up. That has to do with the angle of the paddle at the moment of contact. If it's pointing the wrong way, the ball's going to go the wrong way. But where the ball lands isn't the only thing that matters. It also matters where the ball was coming from, because that's going to influence the rebound. So stand in a place that's really smart and give yourself an advantage. Don't forget, just because you're standing out wide doesn't mean you have to serve out wide. You could always change the angle of the paddle and hit it toward the tee. Or just because you're standing near the tee doesn't mean you have to serve there. You could change the angle and serve out wide, so you can keep your opponents guessing. But it's smart to think about what is your bread and butter serve. What's the go-to? What are you going to use most of the time? And it's smart to stand in a place that makes it easier to do that. So right now, it's pretty indisputable that when you talk about the best doubles player in the world, at least on the men's side, we're typically talking about Ben Johns. But what is it that makes him so good? I'm going to show you. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is show you some highlights from one particular match. This is a Pro Pickleball Association Orange County Cup from 2021. On the far side of the court, Riley Newman and Tyson McGuffin taking on Ben Johns and his older brother, Colin. Okay, so we're going to look at some points here. Usually I'll show it in its entirety first, and then we'll break down piece by piece so you can see what it is that separates Ben Johns really from the rest of the pack when we're talking about doubles pickleball for sure. Okay, so let's watch this point, then we'll take it apart. So one of the things about Ben Johns that I really like is how kind of unflashy he is. Very often it surprises you that he's having so much success because he doesn't do a whole lot of really fancy things all of the time, but he does do some fundamentals well. So look here, he receives this pretty wide backhand dink. He steps across his body. That's not usually the ideal technique we like to see players use. Usually people from that position are kind of off balance, but Johns is so good at this. He uses it quite a lot, and he plays a nice backhand dink down the line over the high part of the net, but Newman cannot attack it. So it's just good, solid fundamentals. Newman and McGuffin really kept the ball away from Ben Johns, so he had to make sure that when he did get the opportunity, he sort of did the right thing with it, but didn't do too much. So you see here a nice little exchange with McGuffin. He goes back and forth with the backhand, keeping the ball low enough, can't really be attacked. And look here, this is the key point. Newman looking to drive the ball right at Ben's body. Ben handles it like it's the easiest thing he's ever done. Not just getting the ball back in play, but getting it down low. Look how low this ball is. There's no way Newman's going to be able to attack that from down there. So that's just good, solid defense from Ben Johns, and then they're back in a rally. All right, let's look at another point, another example of why Ben Johns is so tough to play against. Let's watch this first. Okay, so notice how he returns down the line here. This is forcing McGuffin to make a choice. He knows that going cross-court is more favorable for the geometry of the court, lower net, longer distance, but he's trying to pick on Colin Johns, go down the line. Ben is able to step across and get that ball with his forehand, and he threads the needle here, seeing that there's a little bit of a hole, such a tight hole between McGuffin and Newman. So good pinpoint accuracy with that forehand roll volley. Now, if you like what you saw in the last point, you're going to really love this one. So again, we see Johns returning so that there has to be a down-the-line drop. If they want to keep it away from Ben, they're going to have to make a tough down-the-line drop toward Colin Johns, less favorable geometry. And look, Colin's able to get that ball above net height, keep McGuffin back. And that's thanks to the direction of that return. Now here, Ben is going to start to move the players around a little bit, move Newman and McGuffin, and you're going to see why that's so important in a second. So you see how he pulls Newman out wide here. Newman makes a good dink. There's no problem with that. Again, Ben, this time he is going to play to McGuffin. So a little bit of tit for tat here, go to one guy, then go to the other. Now you can see where Johns is. McGuffin's going to think, hey, there's some open room here on this cross court. And Ben comes across, takes that ball out of the air as a volley. It doesn't hit it hard, but because he's taking it out of the air as a volley, he's taking away time for McGuffin to react. Plays a nice little cross court. They sort of freeze him out here for a moment. Backhand, can't do a whole lot with it, so he's so patient, plays just a good normal dink. And there we go. Look at that, threading the needle just past the left hip of Newman and the right hip of McGuffin. There's so little room there. Also notice how low this ball is. This is below net height, so it's a difficult ball to attack with speed. And you can take something off it when you have a good amount of topspin on it and you're able to find that tiny little gap. So tough. All right, here's another point that illustrates Ben Johns and how good he is. Let's watch it and then we'll see some of the elements that make it so special. All right, in this point, Ben Johns serving. He gets the ball as a drop. Newman hits it to him, and he plays a drop that's okay. It's not super high, but notice how calmly he comes forward. He plays this from three-quarter court. Sometimes people talk about earning your way to the line. It's just such a steady, relaxed volley. Notice how stable the paddle face is. That's going to improve control. You've got to be able to play those good volleys, those good drops from all over the court, even at three-quarter court. Ben Johns does this better than anyone else I see on the pickleball tour. Look at this position of his wrist. That is not usually a very comfortable position for most people. Usually they're going to pop the ball up. Johns does such a good job of keeping that ball low. And look how low it is for McGuffin. He's got to reach for it to get it out of the air. Doesn't play a great volley. Goes back a little bit too wide. And Ben Johns is so astute when it comes to knowing when you can hit that around the post shot. That ATP lets that ball get out wide enough and doesn't hit it super hard, but hits it just close enough to the feet of Newman that he's not able to hang on. Nicely done. All right, so this is the end of the match. This happens to be match point. By this point, Newman and McGuffin have realized that the younger Johns is the one to keep the ball away from. So Ben's got to work a little bit harder to get it. You see him coming across here to play this third shot drive. Again, not trying to win the point necessarily with that shot, but he's able to handcuff McGuffin a little bit, at least so that Tyson can't put the ball back with really any authority. Gets the ball back in play, that's fine, but can't do much damage with it. Now here we go, a nice low backhand volley. We talked about Ben being good when he's off balance or just stretching a little bit. Newman can't attack this ball because it gets low enough and it's slow enough. And then here we see a little bit of a keeping Ben Johns out of the play moment by McGuffin and Newman. This is so tough here to maintain your focus when you're not the one touching the ball. You've got to be ready for anything, and he is. Newman plays a really good shot. Look, it's right by the hip on the right side, sort of shoulder height, I guess. And Ben is so quick to see that ball coming and then to get out of the way. Look at this position here. I mean, very often it's not what you're doing when you have the ball, it's what you're doing when you don't have the ball. And Ben Johns does such a good job of that. So tough to play against. He and brother Colin go on to defeat Newman and McGuffin.
All right, if you've been around pickleball for any length of time, there's a pretty good chance that you've heard the phrase, if you've got him back, keep him back. And essentially the idea is if you're up near the net and your opponents are far away, well, they can't do that much damage, right? It's 22 feet from the baseline to the net, plus another 7 for you at the kitchen. That means your opponents, if they're behind the baseline, are like 30 feet away from you. And it's really tough to put people in trouble, to cause problems for them from 30 plus feet away. So the idea is that you push them back, they can't do much damage. And yeah, it's not a bad idea. But I would argue that we fall into a trap if we always think, got him back, keep him back. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, let's look at some junior action first. I'll show you this point and then I'll break down the key moment here. Love watching these youngsters play. Okay, so check it out here. As this point unfolds, the player here on the left comes crashing the net. Now, the kid receiving the ball here, if he was following the got him back, keep him back idea, he would have hit this ball back cross court because the girl on the right-hand side of the court was further back away. But that's not the priority. The priority is avoiding the player at the net who's crossing. And so this is a nice example of not going back deep. Here's a little practice point from 4 of the game's best. Now, in this case, if the player was following the got him back, keep him back strategy, he would go cross court 2 back towards Steve Deacon. But instead, he realizes this ball is a little bit high, and so that means the player closer to the net is actually quite vulnerable. A bit of a fancy shot here. It's nice. He gets the ball back, but you can see how much trouble he is in. So in this case, when your opponents are up at the net and you receive a ball that's a little bit higher and maybe the net player is vulnerable, got him back, keep him back is not actually the smart play. Instead, the smart play is to go at the net person, the one who's vulnerable, the one who's going to have less time to react, or if you see that net player sort of crossing in front, then going back behind them. Got him back, keep him back is not a bad idea, but it's not the only idea you should subscribe to when you're receiving balls at the net. So there you go. Is if you've got him back, keep him back wrong? No, I wouldn't say so. It can be a pretty useful neutralizing skill to push your opponents back. But sometimes you can do more than that. Sometimes you want to do more than that. Sometimes you must do more than that. Because remember, if they hit a good 3rd shot drop, or I guess by that point it's a 5th shot or a 7th shot, who knows? If they hit a good shot drop, if they hit a good drop, they can then come to the net and all of a sudden that advantage is gone. Got him back, keep him back is not bad, but winning the point is even better. If you're like many pickleball players, you probably don't love hitting backhands. There aren't too many people I've come across who said, oh, Mark, backhands are my favorite. I love to do them, especially when we're talking about lower level players, even intermediate players, even advanced intermediate players often work pretty hard actually to avoid their backhand, right? They run around it to hit their forehand or whatever. But next time you're watching advanced players play, whether this is online or in person somewhere, notice how often they choose to play backhands. And this is especially true when returning serve.
A lot of the time they go out of their way to play a backhand return. Why is that? What's going on here? Let's talk about it. Okay, so the first thing to remember is that advanced players are lazy. They don't want to run more than they have to. Well, I'm just kidding about the lazy part. They're not lazy, of course, but why would you want to run more than you have to? If the ball comes to your backhand, you want to play a forehand, you got to run all over the court to avoid it. Instead, if that ball comes to your backhand side and you happily just play from your backhand side, you don't have to move so much. And that is pretty important if you're trying to conserve energy. Maybe you're trying to make it to a gold medal match at the end of the day. Anyway, you get the idea. So one of them is just ease of movement. You don't have to move so much. You don't put yourself as out of position going off the court. And by the way, when you're playing against other advanced players, they tend to be pretty good at aiming the ball, so getting it out toward your backhand. They're going to know that if you're going to put yourself out of position, if they just serve toward that backhand, they're often going to create an opening. So hit your backhand because it's over there. You can still keep good position in the court. Here are some nice examples of backhands, and you'll notice here that there's kind of like a little pendulum action here. All these players are right-handed, so you can see the backhand slice goes kind of like across their body as they hit. Now this tends to be a pretty comfortable motion for many players, especially if they come from other racket backgrounds where they have been hitting a ball with a backhand slice. This is a good way to put spin on the ball, and spin can be really useful when you're hitting a return of serve. Why is that? Well, if the ball is spinning, then it's a little bit tougher to hit a really precise drop. And if a player tries to play a precise drop, but there's a lot of spin, there's a better chance that the drop is hit poorly and can then be attacked. So being able to put some spin on the ball is a good idea when hitting returns, and it tends to be fairly easy to do off that backhand side. The other nice thing about backspin is that ball tends to stay lower. It skids a little bit more, can be a little bit tougher to handle, and that's a really useful thing as well when you're approaching the net to keep that ball low. So why not make your life easier? Rather than having to run yourself ragged all over the court and sometimes put yourself out of position, just learn to hit a nice, easy backhand and make your life more comfortable. Okay, so there you have it. When returning serve with a backhand, a lot of people really like it. It's really easy when you're hitting slice, when you're trying to put backspin on the ball, or maybe even a little bit of side spin. You've got this kind of like natural pendulum action happening that's often a little bit more controlled on the backhand side than on the forehand side. So maybe this is something you can go out and practice yourself, is practice returning that backhand, use a little bit of side spin, use a little bit of backspin, see how it goes. Wouldn't it be nice to not be afraid of hitting your backhand?